How's it going? Welcome. Thanks for joining me. We're going to be studying the Dhammapada chapter or verse Pada 3. Let me pull it up on the screen. This way y'all can read it. Welcome. Thanks for joining. If you guys have comments or questions, please comment. It's an interactive study. So my name is Vincent Ferra. I'm actually the third. My grandfather's last name was Pascalicchio. And then when he came over to America from Sicily, he changed his last name from Pascalicchio to Ferrer. So I'm named after the Saint Vincent Ferrer. And at 43 years of age, I finally decided to read Saint Vincent Ferrer's one of his books. And it turns out he was a theologian and he was educated in physics. So I'm also a theologian and I'm educated I'm a polymath. So I'm educated in a lot of subjects. But I'm very interested in the holy books. The Dhammapada consists of 196 suttas. It's about purifying and liberating your soul from duality to prevent yourself from future suffering. And the second pada gets into the first 5 limbs of yoga. No, 4 limbs of yoga. No, 5 limbs of yoga. And then the third pada gets into the 5th, 6th, the 6th, 7th, and 8th limbs of yoga. So the first 5 limbs are your yamas, your niyamas, which is your moral and ethical code, your universal law. The third limb is asana, which is really about training your body so that it's strong, because you can't meditate if it's not strong. And it's also about developing a strong, steady body. The body has to be trained if you want to attain these types of states. So there's a physical training that goes along with it. Then the 4th limb is pranayama, which is where you start breaking from the physical into the breath. Start working with your breath, charging your life force energy up to high levels. The 5th limb is pratyahara, where you direct the senses away from outward objects and inwards towards the soul, which brings us to the 3rd pada, which starts with concentration, meditation, and samadhi. Interesting thing about samadhi after years of study, the Buddhists had jhana and the yogis had samadhi. So I was wondering, what's the difference? And after translating the Dhammapada and studying the Yoga Sutras, the jhana states and the samadhi states, I think, are the same thing. And there's 9 levels to each one. Samadhi is absorption. And that'll bring us to the sutras, because there's no substitute for reciting the sutras. And each sutra is important. Actually, in this text, out of the 196 sutras, there's probably 160 to 170 that are essential. Some of them are outdated or not necessary. And in the 3rd pada, it gets into the spiritual powers, which is kind of not necessary. But here we go. Sutra 3.1. Fixing your consciousness is on one point is concentration. Sutra 3.2. A steady, continuous flow of attention directed towards a single point or an object is meditation. That's why I love this book. They don't sugarcoat it. They get right into it. They tell you exactly what you need to know. It's non-biased. It's non-offensive. It gets right to the point. Thanks for joining. Welcome. Sutra 3.3. When the object that appears in the eye shines forth in truth and without conceptual judgment, this is samadhi. So now they're explaining to you what samadhi is, right? But they explained concentration, meditation, and samadhi. Now the next sutra, when concentration, meditation, and oneness are focused upon one thing, this is called samyama. So when you start practicing the top 3 limbs together, it has its name. It has samyama. I'll give the second translation for this. This is why my translation is the only translation that has multiple translations. And that's because when you're translating from Sanskrit, trayam ekatra samyama, when you're translating from Sanskrit over to English, the Sanskrit words, you can see it's 3 words. The words had a very broad meaning back then. There were a lot less words in the language. The English words has over 72,000 words. The Sanskrit language has around 5,000 words. It's just an estimate. But you can see how many more concise words there are in English, which are good when you're trying to get depictive points across, but they're bad when you're trying to explain generative subjects. That's why I give multiple translations. Perfect control of mental concentration is when concentration, meditation, and absorption are practiced together on one subject. Good morning, Gatam. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Sutra 3.4. When dharana, dhyana, and samadhi are practiced together, it constitutes integration or samyama. So again, if you know the Sanskrit yogic words, you're a lot better off with the text, but I do write it so that you don't have to know the Sanskrit to understand it. Sutra 3.5. The light of awareness and insight come to fruition when one masters samyama. Second translation, your understanding is illuminated when the mastery of samyama is achieved. Sutra 3.6. The practice of samyama is mastered by progressive stages. Sutra 3.7. Dharana, dhyana, and samadhi are more subtle than yama, niyama, asana, and pranayama. So there it goes. When you're starting out with the first 4 limbs of yoga, it starts from morals first, universal law and knowledge, then physical, then breath and energy, then all the way from the physical into the soul, and then into the concentration techniques. But what they say is Nirbija Samadhi is even more subtle than Samyama. So all of these things, you have to take these steps. You have to hear the knowledge. To get this by yourself, it's extremely rare. Even the Buddha himself had education. He was definitely learned in Sankhya philosophy. He probably read the Vedas, and he probably read the Yoga Sutras. So to reach this point without getting the study, it's basically impossible. It even says you have to recite the suttas. So Nirbija Samadhi is the state where all of your attachments are gone and you're in this state permanently. And it gets into it because there's an actual physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and elemental change that occurs when you get into these high levels. And that's why with the people that I see who are suffering, when you go through the physical training and train your physical body gets strong. But then when you start training the mind, there's an actual transformation that occurs until you no longer have pain and suffering. You have to purify the soul. So studying the silent movements between rising and falling subliminal impressions transforms the consciousness towards restraint. There you go. This is one of the most important sutras. When you're sitting there, you're paying attention to the rising and falling images, thoughts, memories that are coming up in your mind. Restraining the rising impressions gives birth to an undisturbed flow of tranquility. So you have people who are anxious, anxiety. Well, after you train the body, it becomes mental. So when it becomes mental and you sit there and you're meditating and you're stopping the rising thoughts from coming up, that's what restraint is. Without the physical training, it's a lot more difficult. The way that the Buddha would teach is he would assess the student, and a lot of the people were intellectuals. So he would give them, the vipassana first, or meditations first, or a little bit of the Four Noble Truths first. But in the yoga, traditionally, you would start with the physical training because that builds up the strength of the body, and the physical training builds up the strength of the mind and concentration. 3.11. When you weaken scattered attention and increase one-pointed attention, you begin transformation towards samadhi. Sutra 3.12. One-pointed consciousness emerges when rising and falling thought processes are in balance. Constant vigilant awareness that goes from one-pointed awareness to no-pointed attentiveness is ekagrata parinama. So you're starting off by focusing on one point, restraining your thoughts. But when you can start to stop your thoughts from coming up for longer periods of time, it's a different level of consciousness where your consciousness becomes not single focused. In the earlier sutras, it says, when your consciousness dissolves in the space around you. So one of the meditations that we do is paying attention to what's happening inside of our body and then paying attention to what's happening outside of our body at the same time. Another one is focusing on the universe. There's meditations that you do to eliminate short-sightedness, separateness, and closed-mindedness. There's specific meditations that you do for it. And if you do these meditations over time, those things get kind of way, because the goal is actually omniscience and omnipresence. That's the goal. 3.13. Omniscience is all knowingness. Omnipresence is all presentness. Oneness with all of existence. That's the goal. 3.13. By mastery of Nirodha is cessation. It's the third noble truth of the Buddha, that all things fall away. Samadhi and ekagrata, the spiritual practitioner undergoes a metamorphosis. This is what I was saying. That affects the elements, organs, senses, body, and mind, bringing one to a stable conscious state. When you get into these high states, there's an actual physical, mental, and energetic change that takes place. Okay? 3.14. The background essence stays the same in all states. Sutra 3.15. The difference in the order of events creates different transformations in mind and objects. I'm going to read all three translations for this one, guys. I looked at 1111, good numbers. Progressive sequential changes cause distinct changes in stages of evolution. I'll read the third translation. Succession of these different phases causes particular changes in the consciousness. So basically, the consciousness that experiences every moment is the same from moment to moment. And the background essence of every moment is the same. But there's different sequential changes that take place around you. And these sequential changes change the consciousness. That's why that's why the stages of consciousness or the outside influences are supposed to purify the soul. So you're supposed to accept pain for purification. Sutra 316. By samyama on the three kinds of mental transformation, knowledge of the past and the future can be seen in the inner eye. So it sounds like a lot, but really you're just seeing like what your action is going to do and what your non-action is going to do, and you see the beginning and an ending of everything. Most people only see things at the end, but in yoga you see the beginning and the end. Sutra 317. A word, its meaning, and the idea behind it often become confused. By samyama on the sound produced by any being, knowledge of its meaning is obtained. Sutra 319. By samyama on the disgusting signs or the distinguishing signs of others' bodies, knowledge of their mental impressions are known. This is real simple. You can read body language. Sutra 320. A yogi who has mastered samyama is able to see beyond the physical and into the more subtle aspects of objects and ideas focused upon. Basically, you can see deeper into things. You don't see things for the surface anymore. For example, you can look at somebody and see their heart. You can look at them and see their soul. You can look at them and see their illnesses. So when your third eye opens like this, you can see far beyond the physical. 321. By samyama on the body's energetic realms, one gains the ability to intercept the light before it reaches the eye of onlookers, thus making oneself invisible. So now it gets into the spiritual powers of yoga. I mean, I guess it's kind of fun. I've done this before. I've been able to bend the light before, so I've done this one. Sutra 322. Through samyama on the subtle realms, one can manipulate the flow of the energies perceived by the senses. So when you get into this type of consciousness, you can manipulate energy. Sutra 323, the effects of actions are immediately manifesting or slowly manifesting. By samyama on your actions, you will know what fruits they will bear. You will learn the exact time of your death. So when you get really self-controlled and self-disciplined, you know what your actions are going to bear. You know what kind of fruit they're going to bear. The fruit that your action bears, they either take place fast or slow. So you want to know both. You want to be long-sighted in your views. And also, the Buddha would call this is where the Buddha gets into skillful action, being very wise with your actions. That's why the Buddha spoke the way he did. Like every time somebody got offended by what the Buddha would say, he learned from it. So he didn't say it like that anymore. And then he would read the person he was talking to and know exactly. And the other thing is they try to bait you into it, right? They try to bait you into the fight because they're attached and they have their attachments to the people, and they're holding grudges and they're holding attachments, and the Buddha had no attachments. So people didn't understand him. They said he was a radical. They hated him. They went to his teachings and yelled at him. Yeah. 324. By perfecting kindness and virtue towards all beings, one gains moral and emotional strength. 325. Well, this one here says by perfecting kindness and virtue towards all beings, but in Sutra 133, it says indifference towards the wicked. Indifference towards the wicked. Because if you're not indifferent towards the wicked, you end up getting in that mental spiral, falling into the negative state. And it's very easy to talk about it, but when somebody's being disrespectful to you, rude, obnoxious, bossy, overstepping their boundaries, when somebody's doing that to you, trying to control you, talking bad about you behind your back, going and spreading bad things about you. When somebody's doing that to you, it's very difficult not to get sucked into that. That's where the concentration comes into play, and also avoiding avoiding things. The Buddha says it's unpleasant for a saint to be amongst the sinners. He says it's unpleasant for the wise to be amongst the unwise. He says, Buddha says it's literally painful for the wise, the pure, and the virtuous to be in the presence of the wicked and the unwise. It's literally painful. 325. When one does samyama on a creature and the qualities it possesses, one acquires that creature's ability. In my art form, this is one of the meditations that I have. There's the main creatures, and you meditate on each creature and you gain their abilities. The strength of the elephant, the grace of the gazelle. Well, what is your intention for watching me? What's your real intention? I can sense some of the intentions through the screen. 326. By viewing things in the light of his inner eye, the yogi can know anything about whatever he does samyama upon. Because it's just there. Like we're blinded by our preconceived thoughts and conceptions when we look at something, right? But when we open up our heart and our soul to what is, the Buddha would call it perfect vision. You've rid yourself of all your personal preferences, likes, dislikes, biases. You're open-minded, you're long-sighted, you're concentrated. When you get to that type of level, samyama is sustained concentration. Okay, so concentration, Dabbler, this is a great question. Concentration is the sixth limb. It's focusing your mind on one point in time and space, one subject or one object. So right now you're focusing on the sutras. You're concentrating on the sutras. When you're doing vipassana or pranayama, you're focused on the breath. You're focused here. Okay. From concentration comes meditation. So if I focus on 327 on the screen, if I focus on that for 5 minutes straight, I'm meditating on it. Samyama occurs naturally when you do that because you get absorbed. So you have to understand that you have the intellect, okay? You need to know everything that you're made up of, everything, all right? You have your body. I'm not going to break down the body, but the body has a lot to it. So the body starts first. From the body, the mind, you have intellect, personality, and memory, okay? But the yogi has to know the difference between the intellect and the soul. Because if you go further down from the mind, you have the spirit and the soul. Okay. And when you're in samyama, you're viewing right from the soul. You're not, the mirror of the mind isn't there, but the soul becomes absorbed. It literally absorbs in the time and in the space around you. So you start by bringing your spirit into your body, by grounding, by feeling your body, right? But then when you're meditating, when you're watching the falling and the rising impressions, okay? When you're watching the thoughts and the memories arise and you're watching them fall away, you introspect on where are the memories coming from and where are the memories going, okay? Then when you see where the memories are coming from and they're going, it's deeper than that. And the sciences know that the brain does not have enough memory to hold all of your life experiences, but science can't explain yet where the memories are kept. So when you watch your memories form, you'll watch where they go. And then I was told by a guru that the soul is found the inner right side of the heart and it's the size of the thumbnail. So this is where the soul resides. So when you meditate, you know this is your soul. Then when you're concentrating and you're meditating, there's experiences where you're absorbed. You're absorbed. And then the other thing is that you should meditate on the three conscious states. This is another one that's extremely important. The waking state is right now. I'm talking to you. I'm awake. I have a physical body. I'm interacting through the senses. I'm in the waking state, okay? The second state is called nidra. It's the dreamless state. It's the state from when you lay your head on the pillow to the time that you dream. During that time, the Yoga Sutra says that you experience what it's like to have your mind completely stilled. Now, for years and years of doing the meditation where I lay my head down on the pillow and I do my best to stay conscious during the nidra state, which came from a lot of lying on bed, tossing and turning, stressing, worrying, Then when you lay there, you relax your body, you start to meditate, concentrate on your breath. I experienced the omnipresence during the nidra state. So I experienced what it was like to see from my soul and experience everything from my soul, all of existence during that state. The third state is the dreaming state. During the dreaming state, you experience consciousness, but you don't have a physical body. During that state, you experience your. I've fallen asleep while practicing and continued practicing without personality mind. Is it like that? No, you don't want to. When you say falling asleep, do you mean during the time when you lay your head to the pillow, to the time when you sleep, to the time when you dream? Yes, I'm gonna say yes to this. Mm-hmm. But physically you fell asleep, but spiritually you were still awake, right? So you're still practicing consciousness all the time, being conscious of where you are, being conscious in the present moment. But definitely yes, Stabler. Okay, so 327. These aren't even. This one, with the advent of the sciences and the telescopes, 327 is not even necessary. One gains knowledge of the solar system through Samyama on the sun. Through Samyama on the moon, one learns the stars and constellations. 327, 328 aren't even necessary. 329, by Samyama on the pole star, one knows the course of destiny. That's interesting. Sutra 330, by Samyama, this one's important now. See, the mind, I don't think that the mind doesn't shut off. The mind should stay awake. So what it's like for me is I do the meditation here and here, right? And then when I start to get into samadhi states, I see a light around here. Okay. And the brain is on. The brain is not only on, but the whole brain is working. It's not working in the front, in the middle, in the back, in the right lobe, in the left lobe. It's not going thinking scientific, then thinking artistic, then contemplating, then making an opinion, then having an literal thing, and then comparing it to a memory. The mind is 100% lit up. Well, you see, right now I'm using my ego for you, right? In fact, I've been called egocentric. That's one of the reasons why some people don't like me, because I only use my ego to make other people see theirs. So I was actually called egocentric. But right now I'm communicating with you through my ego. I'm only using it as a tool. But the ego, it also means the personality. Okay, because ego is always looked at as like a bad term. Oh, he's all ego, or they're all ego. The ego is the conglomerate of personality that you use to communicate, and that constitutes your predisposed responses to situations, right? Based on your past experiences and how you choose to act and react to things. So it's really the personality. So I couldn't communicate to you if I didn't have some kind of a personality or an ego, right? But when I'm sitting in silence for 2 or 3 hours, it's off. But the mind, you're concentrating the mind. You keep developing the mind. The mind, if Buddha says, if you lose the moment for 1 millisecond, you get sucked back into hell, samsara. He says, you'll regret it if you lose mindfulness for 1 second when you're pulling an iron hot ball out of your mouth. Like that's how bad losing mindfulness is for 1 second. And the other thing is, backstepping is one of the main hindrances. Okay. They call it backsliding. So right now you're getting all this information, you're leveling up spiritually, you're sucking in the sutras, you're learning, right? But if you lose it, then it's right back to the beginning. So that's why recitation of the sutras is so important until you get to the highest state. Once you attain full enlightenment, then you don't need to study or do anything anymore. You're in that state permanently for the rest of eternity. Well, your soul is liberated, and then when your soul's liberated, when it leaves the body, if it leaves the body, see now here's where when the soul's liberated like that, it doesn't get drawn back into the heavenly realms, okay? And if you follow Jesus, he takes you to 2 places one for 2,000 years, another for 2,000 years. So you can get into the high heavens, right? And you might not have to be reborn again. Okay. But in this art form, there's alchemical practices that I do for longevity. So in this art form, you can liberate your soul and extend your life to a very long length. Sutra 330. By samyama on the navel, you acquire knowledge of the inner workings of the body. So this one's extremely important. When we're doing our meditation, we focus on the navel. You have to know everything there is to know about the human body. You have to unlock all the chakras. You have to you have to learn the central nervous system, the organs, the marrow, the blood, the bone, the tendons, the muscle, the fluids, the five senses, the five main sense organs, the organs of action. So it starts with fully learning everything there is to know about your body. All layers, everything. The cardiovascular, the circulatory, the respiratory system, the nervous system, everything. You have to, the blood, the fluids, the glands. You have to know everything there is to know about the body. You have to fully integrate the body. And you do that by meditating on the navel and focusing on the breath. And you ground. Your spirit sits in your feet chakras, your knee chakras, and your first and your second chakra. That's where your spirit sits. If you can't feel your feet and the earth and your knees and here, your spirit's not in your body. It's following the mind. The mind goes wherever it wants. It's always chasing the five senses, always. So it's always torn. So when we draw the mind inwards, we're calming the senses, we're focusing inwards inside the body, developing a very deep awareness in the body, because you have to keep the spirit in the body and focus on the soul. You're viewing directly from the soul. They call it the seer too, S-E-E-R. They say that you're viewing it right through the seer. Well, this is why when we get into samadhi, you're crossing over into the highest realms of the Yoga Sutras. And in my opinion, in the Buddhist text too. 331. See, the Yoga Sutras is extremely concise. That's why I love this text. There's 196 lines. Only 160 or 170 of them are necessary. So really, you only have to commit 160 lines to memory and understand their essence and embody their essence to attain the full nirvana. Your karma has to do with it. Your life choices have to do with it. The physical training has to do with it. I've been doing solitude meditation now for 5 years, meditating in the mountains for months at a time. So most people can't go through the solitude training. Some of the monks, they lose it after like 12 days in solitude. I did like 100 days, like no problem, like that. 331. By samyama on the pit of the throat, one is able to overcome hunger and thirst. This is important. If you're meditating and you can't suppress your appetite, you meditate on the pit of the throat, and that suppresses hunger and thirst. Sutra 332. One can attain motionlessness in a meditative posture by samyama on the space 1 inch down and 1/2 inch inside from where the two collarbones connect to the breastplate. This is called the Karma Nadi. All right, guys. When I read this text, I did all sorts of research into finding out where the Karma Nadi was. This is after researching it for hours and finally making a decision on where it is. So it was very hard for me to find out the Karma Nadi. Before I found out this location, it was basically secretive. 332. By samyama on the Karma Nadi, a subtle tortoise-shaped tube at the pit of the throat, one can make their mind firm, sturdy, and steady. So when you're doing your asana, if you're practicing your physical asana, or if you're practicing meditation is asana, because your body's in a steady, comfortable posture. But when you're doing the more challenging postures, headstand, handstand, forearm stand, plank, when you do that, you can focus on the pit of the throat to hold it, and that will really help you to build your physical steadiness, which will in turn lead to your mental steadiness. That's why the yoga postures are meant to be held, because you're exerting your physical strength to steady your body, and the body can't be steady if the mind's not, because the mind and the body are one. This is why the physical training is important. 333. Through samyama on the light at the crown of the head, one attains holy vision. This one, I absolutely love this sutra. When you see the Christian Catholic people, they would have tonsures. They would cut the hair on the top of their head like this. The monks, St. Anthony, St. Vincent, they would all cut the hair on the top of their head. The Buddhist monks, you see, they shave their head. That's so they can pay attention to the top of the crown of the head. When the body is steady and firm, and you pay attention to the top of the crown of the head, to the light of the top of the crown of the head, you'll notice things. Not many people look up at the sky all the time. If you look up at the sky all the time, you will see the angels and the deities. Not just the holy vision of being able to see the angels and the deities, but also the holy vision of being able to see everything that's going on where you were once blind. There's a story in the Bible where this guy was in a battle. I think he was a king. And this angel awakened his holy vision, and he could see the angels in the chariots of fire just like that. I'll give all three translations for this one. 333 Sutra. Second translation, the ability to see beings in higher realms is achieved by samyama on the light at the crown of the head, Sahasrara Chakra. Let me give the third one. By samyama on the light at the top of the head, one can see angels, masters, perfected, and enlightened beings. You can see those, but it's more than that. You attain holy vision, clairvigilance. You can see everything. You can develop that too. I mean, you can see into objects, you can see atoms, it depends on how you develop it. If you some of them come naturally when you're concentrating, but if you waste too much time trying to develop your spiritual powers, you're not spending enough time trying to do the gifts. So really, if you have your home and you have your food, after that it should be practice. When you're going throughout your day, you're doing skillful action to try to avoid trouble, so that you can do your spiritual practice. If you get too caught up in these gifts or talents and start bragging that you have these talents and stuff like that, it's only going to cause trouble for you. Then people start asking you to demonstrate them, and it's just keep them to yourselves when you attain the spiritual powers of high concentration. 334. All knowledge and powers dawn by themselves when one achieves clarity through a life of purity. This is what I'm saying. After you do your austerity practices and you start to become pure and concentrated, the natural abilities apply by themselves. I highly recommend that you practice grounding and being conscious, steady, comfortable, and aware in your body, because if you're not, then you could overreact, underreact, say the wrong things to the wrong people. So even when you're looking at somebody and you can see all their negative qualities, or you look at them and you can tell that they don't like you, or they're filled with hate, or they're talking bad about you behind your back, when you do that, you have to stay calm, comfortable, and aware. So it takes training to do that. 335. One gains knowledge on the nature of the mind and the qualities of consciousness by samyama on the heart. I'm going to read this one. I'll read the second one. By samyama on the heart area, one acquires insight of knowledge of the tendencies and contents of consciousness. Sutra 335 by far is one of the most important sutras. When you're meditating on the navel, you're meditating on the crown of the head, you're meditating on the body, you're meditating on the heart. You gain the knowledge of consciousness itself. When the soul from the heart becomes one with the soul of existence, that's oneness. See? That's the reason why they depict Buddha with that big halo with the lotus on it. That represents Buddha's soul being one with existence. That's what it represents. Sutra 336. Through samyama practice, one is able to differentiate between intelligence and the soul. This is what I was just telling you. You have to know, this is my intelligence. Oh, I understand what Vincent's saying. Oh, I understand the sutra. You have to be intelligent. In fact, you have to perfect intelligence. Intelligence has to be perfected. Okay, that's what the sutras is for. Perfection of intelligence. But by samyama practice, you're able to know the difference between intelligence and the soul. Because the goal is permanent omniscience, right? That's the goal. If it was easy, there'd be a whole bunch of Buddhas. You know what I mean? Like, there's, a Buddha is a rare being. An enlightened being is a rare being. So you have to know, this is my intellect, this is my soul. It says why. We'll finish out the third pada today. Through the spiritual perception that arises, the yogi acquires divine superphysical seeing, hearing, smelling, taste, touch, feeling, and knowing. The modern day translation: when this level is achieved, one gains clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairscience, clairgustance, clairtendency, clairsentience, and claircognizance. So you gain all the higher senses. You transcend the physical senses. There's a specific meditation in my art form that you do, where you focus on the physical eyes, and I mean every aspect: the eyeball, the tear duct, the pupil, the retina, the pupil opening and closing. Okay, how it goes into the brain and reflects in the nerves and the mirrors, so it gets to your mind. And then you focus on the sense of seeing. Then you focus on the ears, the circles of the ears, the eardrum. Then you focus on the sense of hearing. Then you focus on the nose. You focus on the sense bulbs of the nose, here and here, the two olfactory senses. And then you focus on the sense of smell. Then you focus on the tongue, the taste receptors of the tongue. Then you focus on the tongue all the way down to the throat. Then you focus on the taste. Then you focus on the skin, because skin is feeling. And you focus on all the skin. And then you focus on the sense of feeling. And then you focus on the sixth sense, which is mind. Mind is what perceives it all. So that's the specific sixth sense meditation that goes along with this. That's why this is philosophy, but what makes these traditions and what makes a real spiritual practitioner different is the fact that there's practices that go along with the philosophy. Because philosophy is one thing, but philosophy and practice is something else. Sutra 338. In worldly life, these powers are useful, but they are hindrances to spiritual enlightenment. So you have to survive, right? Survival is root chakra, right? So if you have to blend in with society, you have to make a living, you have to have a place to live, you have to eat food, or else you can't practice. So when you're going throughout your worldly life, if you have these abilities and you have skillful action, then you're doing it so you can do your spiritual practice. That's the difference. If you're doing these worldly things to get rich and enjoy the comforts, that's not yoga, that's not Buddhism, that's not spiritual practice, that's not asceticism, that's nothing. Okay, you're not going to get any spiritual gain from that. And what I've seen is the people who I talk to, they're always complaining, oh, I need this surgery, oh, my stomach this, my stomach that. I've trained through pain that would put a normal man in the hospital on morphine for months. Okay, pain should be trained through. All right. And when you start to tell them, are you practicing concentration? You can't even explain to them how concentration and the anxiety about the fact that you have pain is what's causing you to want to go to the doctors, you see? And that's because underneath the fifth hindrance is fear of death. So in our flesh, we're built to procreate, we're built to survive. So in the deepest levels of the physical self and the mind, there's the need to survive, the need to procreate. That makes us fear death. Because of that, it gives us anxiety. The result of anxiety is pain. You understand? The result of anxiety is pain. So if you eliminate the anxiety, then you eliminate the pain. But if your body is weak, if you're sitting around eating, not doing yoga, not exercising, not meditating, the body is decaying. The body's dying. And the mind, as soon as you stop meditating, the mind goes into recline. The second you start concentrating, the mind goes into mental decline. That's why the Buddhists, they eat one thing in the morning, 8 o'clock. Then they practice mindfulness for months at a time. Mindfulness. Because as soon as you lose that, it's mental decline. This is why recitation of the sutras is so important. Because if you're constantly reciting the sutras, it's going to sink in and catch on. And they say study is essential. They don't say maybe you should study, maybe you should do this. They say no, study is essential. And that's why you want to learn from an accredited text. And the Yoga Sutras is probably the shortest, most concise accredited text that will definitely lead you to full enlightenment. The Dhammapada teaches a lot of different stuff, but it's 426 verses. The Yoga Sutras is 196 verses. So it's a lot more concise. And there's ways that the Yoga Sutras is superior than the Dhammapada. But the Dhammapada does get into a lot of the deathless state. It talks about a lot of about. So, but you don't, if you're going to focus on the Yoga Sutras, focus on the Yoga Sutras. You don't have to do the Dhammapada. I studied the Tao Te Ching Bible, Yoga Sutras, Dhammapada. I've mastered the texts. Okay. You really don't need to. If you focus on the one text and you practice your 8 limbs, you'll get there. If you go into another text, you might be overextending yourself. Unfortunately, if you've been exposed to it, then you're going to want to know more. But you can trust this text. 339. When you are free from earthly attachments and have a full understanding of the workings of the brain, it is possible to will your consciousness into another's body. I don't do that because it goes into other people's free will, and I don't believe in messing with other people's free will. So, 340. When one may levitate over water, swamps, and thorns through mastery over the upward air current, Udana nerve current. I say this all the time. This is going to be the last time I say it. But when I was working in the LA Fitness in Deer Park, I was homeless, and there was a lot that was fenced in. But in order to get there, I had to walk through about 40 feet of thorn bushes every night for an entire summer. And I walked through the thorn bushes, 40 feet of them, and never got cut by the thorns once. And I was safe there because nobody else could walk through the thorn bushes. So, yeah. So if you want to levitate, it's possible, but you have to really develop your concentration, and you're spending 6 to 8 hours a day practicing this one spiritual power, unless you naturally get it. Some people just naturally can get it. But if you want to do it, here it is. But it takes dedication and devoting your life to it for most people if you want to do it. 341. Radiant light and glowing energy comes to surround the body when mastery over the equalizing vital air current, samyana vayu, found in the navel is achieved. So one of the reasons why you see these auras around the saints, these auras around Buddha, these auras around the saint yogis, the yogic saints, is because they've opened up their navel chakra. They're also cultivating their spiritual energy, their physical energy, and their sexual energy and fluids. They're cultivating their bindu drop. They've released themselves from attachments. The heart chakra's open. So, yeah. 342. Clairaudience is mastered by samyama on the correlation between space and sound. 343. One becomes as light as a cotton fiber and is able to travel through space by samyama on the relationship of the body and ether. 344. I don't think that these are necessary, but they can be helpful. The veil covering illuminated wisdom is destroyed by samyama on the correlation of the consciousness inside and outside of the body. This is what I was saying, guys. This one's important because one of the main meditations that you do, it's taught so differently by so many different teachers, okay? But by focusing on what's happening inside of the body and outside of the body, the veil covering illuminated wisdom dawns. Now, the way that the Buddha would teach it is first by teaching them vipassana, and he would do this mainly to the intellectuals. If you were an intellectual and you went to Buddha, one of the first things he would teach you, he'd give you the Four Noble Truths, he'd give you the Eightfold Path, and he'd give you vipassana meditation. All right. Because bottom line, if you practice vipassana meditation constantly, you're going to reach enlightenment. It's just that simple. All right. But then satipana is the second meditation, and that's paying attention to all of the sense data. These two meditations go together. And what you're really doing is focusing on what's happening inside of the body and outside of the body. You understand? I like the way that yoga teaches it, and the reason why the yogic path is superior. I don't mean to put down Buddhist, but the starting the physical training of asana when they're young builds up the strength of the body and the mind at a young age, so that when they get to be 20 to 24, they're not gluttonous, they're not overweight, they're physically healthy, their body's trained. And by starting the physical training first, you have to go through that physical training to strengthen the mind. You can get it by just doing vipassana, but if you ask me, it's superior to train the physical body first. The physical body is an ongoing training. 345. By samyama on the elements, their mass, gross form, subtle form, interrelationship, and functions, mastery over them is gained. Mastery over the elements. I love this one. Mastery of the 5 elements brings perfection of the body and leads to extraordinary powers. These powers include the ability to make oneself small and to resist outside forces. I am an elemental. I do practice elemental practices. 347. Beauty of form, grace, strength, compactness, and the qualities of a diamond constitute bodily perfection. 348. Mastery over the sense organs is attained through samyama on the interrelationship of the sense perception, object perception, and the ego, sense of I consciousness. You guys get that one? 349. By mastery over the senses of perception, the speed of one's body, senses, and mind match the speed of the soul, and the yogi gains control over the fundamental forces of physical existence. So, how much time do we got here? We got 16 minutes. So I started working out at a young age. I started doing martial arts at a young age. Then for 3 years, I practiced pacifism. And then for 6 years, I was vegan and I only did yoga asana, no lifting weights. Then I started lifting weights and doing yoga asana. Then I started to do martial arts again. Now I'm heavily into the martial arts. My workout routine consists basically about 20 yoga asanas that I do for restoring, stretching, keeping the body healthy, moving the blood into the brain and the pituitary gland and the pineal gland. Then I do weightlifting and calisthenics for muscle mass, for tendon and bone strength, and I do martial arts. And right now, martial arts is my favorite. But when I'm doing the martial arts, when my soul is one with my body, I'm moving as fast as my soul can move. So I experience this on a daily basis. True speed comes without anger. True speed comes with focus. 350. Only one who knows the difference between the intellect and the soul attains ultimate knowledge of all existence and manifestations. How important is this sutra, guys? How important is that? Through recognition of the difference between the intellect and the soul, you may attain all powerfulness and all knowingness. That's how important it is to know your intellect and your soul. When I'm sitting here like this, I'm holding my soul here like this. Because the mind is flighty, right? I want to hear music. I want to watch television. I want to eat food. I want to feel pleasure. I want to smell perfume, right? And the soul gets drawn out through the senses. And it leaves impressions in the mind, likes and dislikes, right? So when I'm sitting like this, I'm holding on to the soul. I'm keeping it from going through the mind into the physical plane. 351. When the seeds of bondage have been destroyed, well, you have to open up all the chakras. It's not Nirbija Samadhi is, if you attain Nirbija Samadhi, it's a big deal. Like, it's a big attainment. I mean, I guess if you're quiet about it, but 351. When the seeds of bondage have been destroyed and the yogi renounces these powers, he may achieve eternal emancipation. This is what I'm saying. 352. The yogi should not take pleasure if contacted by a celestial being because it may create unwanted attachments. I'm an angelic medium, so I hear the angels talking all day long. 353. The yogi gains wisdom free from the limitations of time and space by practicing samyama on one moment and the continuous flow of moments. This is another one, guys. By concentrating on this moment and the continuous flow of moments. I think the next two sutras. When this wisdom dawns, the yogi is able to see everything about whatever he does samyama upon. This includes seeing both ends of the spectrum of duality, positives and negatives, pleasures and pains, the beginning and the end of whatever is in his mind's eye. 355. True wisdom is intuitive and liberating. It simultaneously comprehends all there is to know about all subjects and objects. So again, I always make this reference, but have you ever raised a kid or spent time with a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, 4-year-old kid? I know some of us have, right? When the kid is born, they don't speak a language, right? But they hear it and you speak it to them and they pick it up. If you speak 5 languages to a kid, by the time they're 12 years old, they'll speak 5 languages. So that kid just knows what there is to know about what it is that they're focused on. It's like that. 356. When the intelligence becomes as pure as the soul, the yogi has reached liberation. So when your intelligence becomes as pure as your soul, you reach liberation. That's simple, right? That's why doing the practices. But when you're really sincerely doing the practices, when you're living a life of solitude, when you're not chasing after things, you're meditating 3 or 4 hours a day, you're studying the sutras 2 hours a day, you're devoting your life to your spiritual practice. There's things that happen that are difficult to deal with. Number one, longing. Longing is really hard to deal with. Number two, when you draw your mind in from the senses, it literally goes through withdrawal. Buddha says, when you pull your mind inward from the external stimuli, it's like a fish flopping about on the deck of a boat. So it is extremely painful when you first start to pull your mind in. And it takes really dedicated practice, because if you fill your mind with the sutras 4 days a week, 5 days a week, you're going to get it. If you're doing your meditation and you're doing your practices, you're not overeating, you're not overindulging, you're taking in the sutras, you're going to get it. But if you take in the sutras once and then you're watching a violent movie 5 nights a week, you're filling your mind and your heart with violence. And guess what? There's only room for one thing. Is there going to be room for the sutras, or is there going to be room for the violence? So I'm not against occasional television. Moderation is one of the yamas and niyamas, moderation. It's okay to watch occasional television. It's okay to watch occasional movies. But if you're filling your mind more with that than the sutras, you're not going to get anywhere. The sutra says there's a difference between someone who practices a little bit, someone who practices somewhat, and then someone who practices wholeheartedly. They say there's a difference in the game. They say if you practice with zeal, wholeheartedly, you'll reach the goal fast. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. I really appreciate it. My name's Vincent. My book is for sale. The link is in the description below. Please continue to join me for the studies, guys. Be well. Thanks, guys.